John was a brave firefighter known for his courage and dedication to saving lives. Ever since he was a kid, he was absolutely enamored by the thought of becoming a firefighter, just like his father. His father would come home dirty and exhausted some days, but he had a strong sense of integrity and bravery that John aspired to match. He was lucky to have a role model that embodied these values, and it made him a better man. But one day, it all began with a faint whisper that John heard while alone at the firehouse.
"John, you cannot save them,"
it said. He stood up from his desk and looked around, expecting to see someone, but the station was empty. He tried to ignore it, but the voice persisted, growing louder each night as he worked his shift. At first, he would always get up and look around, determined to find someone, but the security system was enabled and any movement would have set off an alert. There was no way another person was still in the building. This was very disturbing. John began to feel a cold presence in the firehouse, especially in the bunk room where he rested between calls. The whispers continued, reminding him of those he couldn't save. "You will fail them all," they taunted. "You failed once and you will fail again, John." John became obsessed with his duties, spending hours training and preparing for every possible scenario. He spent an hour and a half in the gym, followed by cardio around the local city block. He started seeing ghostly figures in the firehouse, their faces filled with accusation and pain. The whispers grew louder, haunting him more and more frequently. Years ago, John had been unable to save a family from a burning building. There was a married couple and their 2 children trapped on the 6th floor, and the only way in was through the stairwell, which had already begun to fill with smoke. By the time John reached the 6th floor with all his heavy gear, the ceiling had fallen in on the other side of the door, and there was no way to get it open. He could hear their cries. Even to this day, they echo in his head. He heard the cries of the children fading in only a few minutes, until all fell silent from their apartment as he continued hammering at the hinges on the stairwell door. He could not break through. The stone and debris against the other side of the door was too great, and backup had still not arrived. The memory of that tragedy had always haunted him, but now it seemed to blend with his current fears, making him question his abilities and his sanity. He tried as he might to dismiss the thoughts, but they would not relent. Desperate, John confided in his fellow firefighters and even talked to a counselor. But no one believed him about the voices and the ghostly figures. It was obvious that he had been suffering a mental health crisis, but they suggested he was just under stress and needed a long break. This frustrated John, as he knew he was not hallucinating. He could not abandon his post for 2 weeks. He knew he was stronger than that. His family worried about his state of mind, urging him to take some time off. But he ignored their pleas and would often walk out of the room if they brought it up. The whispers became more insistent. "You cannot escape your guilt," they cried. John started seeing the ghostly figures more frequently, their spectral forms following him everywhere. It was the sight of the 2 small children that were the most gut-wrenching for John. He just couldn't get their voices out of his head. The cold presence became unbearable, chilling him to the bone. His performance at work began to suffer. He became paranoid and jumpy, seeing ghostly figures in the shadows. He couldn't tell what was real and what was a figment of his tortured mind. He began recognizing that he had developed a pattern of falling asleep at his post out of sheer exhaustion. He wasn't sleeping through the night. He started doubting his sanity, wondering if he was truly losing his grip on reality. One night, as he was alone in the firehouse, the whispers became a roar. "You will join us soon, John? Soon!" they demanded. He saw the ghost of the family he couldn't save, their faces twisted in pain and sorrow. John screamed and ran out of the firehouse, desperate to escape the voice and the ghosts. He drove recklessly, tears streaming down his face. He slipped in through the front door of his home quietly, as not to wake his family, locked himself in a storage room and fell to his knees, begging for it to stop. Just as he thought he had found respite, the storage room filled with screeching voices, furious and booming. "You cannot escape us, John," they roared. You will soon meet your fate for abandoning them. You will not escape us." John felt a freezing cold deep in his bones. He began to ache as he crouched down and threw his hands over his head. The voices were relentless. They were accompanied by a loud, consistent booming, like bombs going off in the distance. John could not tell whether it was real or just his heartbeat beating like a drum in his own head. This went on for almost 30 minutes as John crouched in a corner in an unsuccessful attempt to make it stop. And then, John winced out of a deep sleep as if someone had startled him. He opened his eyes and looked around. He was still in the dark storage room, but he only heard the deafening sound of silence. What had happened? Was it all a dream? Or had he passed out under severe stress? Was any of this real, or had it only been a nightmare? It was then that John knew he had to get some help. This could not go on. John decided to gather other firefighters who had experienced similar torment. They found strength in each other's stories, and John recognized that many of his colleagues had all struggled silently with their own demons. As they walked out of the firehouse, John felt the weight of unseen eyes still on him. But he wasn't alone anymore. He had found others who had their own demons, and together they would fight the darkness and reclaim their passion for saving lives. And you, dear listener, have you ever heard whispers in the silence of an empty room? Have you ever felt a cold presence that chills you to the bone? You're not alone in your fear. There's something out there, something evil that delights in tormenting the innocent. Don't let it win. Find others who believe you. Together, you can fight the darkness. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and follow us for more. Join us on TikTok and YouTube for more Chilling Chronicles. If you dare!